Okay, next up is the pay-as-you-throw. That's always education and implementation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think as everybody's aware, we've been going through this process, and about, a month, 6 weeks ago, we came to the council and got approval to begin the process of education on the pay-as-you-throw program. After that point, we got some feedback from a number of members of the council that there was some concern about trying to start that program in advance of the upcoming November elections and the new council taking office in January, given that there's going to be, we know, at least some change in the council, some new folks involved. So as a result of that feedback, at staff level, we put a hold on the project till we had an opportunity to speak with you to confirm that that is indeed the direction that you want to go. We've also had a chance to talk with the firm that we have been working with, the consulting firm. They are of the opinion that delaying the process until January would not be a horrible problem in terms of an overall schedule if we were still looking toward potential implementation in the next budget. So basically what we would look at is trying to provide information on the program and where we are and how we got there to any new counselors in our annual orientation program, which normally take, or our biannual, which takes place generally in December, so that we could revisit the issue of how to proceed come January. We also heard that there was some interest in potentially doing a referendum in advance of implementation. A couple of issues to consider there. One is timing. Referendum in advance of implementation probably be in June. That creates some scheduling conflicts with our budget process, and that we're required by charter to adopt a budget by the end of May. Probably could work around that problem. But second, I think our consultant, and I think this is shared by staff, just wanted to indicate that a lot of people going to pay-as-you-throw raises lots of issues in people's minds and lots of questions. We can certainly answer those questions as part of an educational process, but in this instance, I guess everyone who lives in Maine is actually from Missouri, because they're going to say, "Show me." And I think in today's environment, it's very difficult to, even if you answer the question correctly, for people to believe that that's exactly what's going to happen until they see the program working. So the feeling is that a referendum in advance would have less of a chance of being approved, as opposed to the communities, and there have been a number of them in Maine, that have had referendum after implementation where the pay-as-you-throw has been retained. So I just want to raise that as an issue. It's not something we necessarily need to deal with tonight, but it's something you might want to think about in terms of timing of any potential referendum. Doing it in advance, we believe there's potentially we would be potentially putting the upfront investment that we would be making, the $30,000 for the education campaign, at greater risk. Certainly at some point, it's likely there would be a referendum on this, but if it was after implementation, people would have at least had a period of time in which to see how the program worked and evaluate whether what we tell them is actually what happens. So just wanted to confirm that everybody's comfortable with us holding off until after the November election, looking to January to bring it back to the council to get direction on how to proceed.
Council Clute.
Can you just talk a little bit about how a referendum after implementation would work? Because that seems to defeat the purpose.
Well, basically, under our charter, we could certainly have a referendum. The council could either put it out to the public for a vote, or it could be done through the petition process. This clearly would be a subject that would be subject to a referendum process. There is, however, a provision in our referendum ordinance that basically says if there's a referendum about a budget issue, the change doesn't take place till the subsequent budget year. So just as an example, if we adopted in our budget and made the changes to reflect the new program in our budget, if there was a referendum at any point after that during that same budget year, that change would not take place until the following budget is adopted. So we'd have to roll the program back a year later and go back to the old system. That's a protection just that we don't get caught short during a budget.
Councilor Dote?
So just for clarification, when you're saying push off to January and ask for direction then, are you going to be asking for another vote in January whether we proceed with this or
I
not?
suspect we probably will have to have at least a workshop to get a feeling from the council if they want us to proceed, because there'll be enough change on the council that it might have an impact. Plus, I believe that there may be some folks who are still listening and thinking and may not be firm in their opinions.
Okay, so how would that really work though? Because we have something that's already been passed by us to do this. So you'd have to overrule that.
It's been authorized, but it doesn't necessarily mean, I wasn't ordered, I was authorized. So if the consensus is not to do it until later, we can hold off, or if you'd like, I could certainly bring something formal back at the next meeting.
Okay, well, I guess just to address a couple of things. I mean, if the reason people don't want to do this now is because new counselors won't be up to speed, there's no reason that anybody running can't be here at every one of those sessions. Every time we've had an election, there's always some issue that comes right around election time, and we push it off 6 months because, well, there's a new council coming in, and that's why we're always 6 months behind. You know, there's no reason. People who are running are here every time. They could be here listening just like us and be right up to speed when they touch the floor in January. I don't see that's a reason to wait. I think the biggest part of this is the education piece. I think, you know, going forward with the education is not saying that we're implementing it. It's making sure everybody understands what the actual program is. And the longer we put that off, now you're going to be in even more time constraint to try to get that in for the next budget if it does go through. This is going to give more time to get that education process out there. I don't like having to put it off after January. I'm just going to say that. I think the education is the biggest part of this. Whether it passes after or not, we'll see, but I think people need to be educated about it.
Councilor Keir?
So I agree in part with Councilor Dope. One, I'm a firm believer that pay as you throw will happen in this community. It's just a matter of time. I mean, once we're at a point we're paying $90 a ton for trash, our property taxes will see that, and people will recognize that this is the way to go. I'm not sure this community is ready for that yet, but I agree with Councilor Dote that no sense putting off the education piece. Let's start that. Because either way, it's coming to this community at some point. It may be 5 years from now, it may be longer, and it may be shorter, depending on what happens in the local area with refuse and how we get rid of that. So I'm okay with the education piece starting, and I think the next council will have to decide if they're going to the next step.
Other comments?
Unless I hear anything different, I'll get started then.
Well, Mr. Mayor?
What's the, yeah,
Thanks. I will say that the next council can do, it could be an entirely different council. It could be a similar makeup, it could be different one way or another. The possibilities are all over the place, and no one really knows. But to spend $30,000 today and have the next council turn around and cancel the whole project would be a huge waste of money. I believe that it would be better to wait until we know who the council is and they tell us, whoever they may be, what they think of this. And if we have a lot of counselors in this room who are all for this, that's pretty much going to ensure that that money will be spent and the program, at least marketing-wise, will go forward. But I would hate to spend 30 grand at least right now, and then 4 months from now, have it axed. At that point, we're wasting a lot of money for something that can be stopped or not. But I think it is wise to wait and see who we have on the council and what their opinion is. Otherwise, we're really just throwing money into the wind. It might land in the right places, but it might blow away. And I don't think that's wise at this point.
Councilor Libby?
Ed, what was the original vote to authorize the $30,000 for the education program?
Unanimous? It was either 7-0 or 6-1. I don't recall totally, but it was a strong majority of the council.
And when was that vote, approximately?
3
month.
months ago, wasn't it?
June?
30 to 45 days ago.
June?
Yeah, June.
And we talked about a 9-month education program?
We had basically been looking at something that would probably run, well, actually, the whole thing got delayed because we went to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee referred it back to the council with a request for some more information. So that took about at least 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. So we probably would have been gearing up the program if we'd gone right away. We still had to go back to the Finance Committee to get the final contract approved. We'd probably be just about getting to the point now of getting the program started. The original schedule was 9 months, I think, Dave?
We had allowed for that.
I think we had allowed for 9 months. We did talk to the consultant. They felt that they could do it in a shorter period of time. In fact, they had a little bit of a concern at spreading it out. They may want to have actually taken a little bit more time at the front end to get organized, because they were afraid if you did it over too long a period of time, it would lack its impact. It would kind of get watered down. People would not pay as much attention as if you did something in a more concentrated period. But they felt comfortable doing it either way.
So, just to piece this all back together, back in, let's say, June, this council unanimously, or fairly close to unanimously, authorized $30,000 to pay for an education program to educate the citizens of Lewiston about what pay-as-you-throw would look like if we were to implement it. And I think over the summer, all of us have heard from residents that there's a lot of concern about what that looks like. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. I've not heard much at all in the way of positive feedback on pay-as-you-throw. I've worked very hard at trying to explain what I think are the positive aspects of pay-as-you-throw, but it's still very challenging to overcome the concerns that residents have about the cost. And it's really all about the cost. Even when you explain, you know, the impacts on the property tax rate of continuing as we are, it's still difficult for people to wrap their heads around. So I think we're at the point now of all of us collectively as a council sort of backtracking and saying, well, maybe now is not the time, maybe we need to hold off a bit. And given that a lot of us are looking at an election and some of us are not looking at an election, putting the brakes and saying, hold off. Does that fairly well sum up things? I see some heads nodding. Councilor Donte doesn't agree, but I see a lot more heads nodding. So I'm comfortable with putting the brakes on at this point. I do think the public needs, I think some kind of structured outreach program to better understand the complicated pieces of pay-as-you-throw, because there are economic benefits, there are environmental benefits, there are property tax benefits, but at this point it's going to be very challenging, I think, to overcome the public perception of the program. So I'm comfortable with putting a pause.
I would just say that, excuse me, I've had a lot of feedback, pushback on that. I just tell these people, look, before you make your decision, go listen to what it's about, and then you can make an educated decision instead of just saying, I don't want it. So, but he's right. There's an awful lot of people out there that are just really wound up about that.
That's why the education is so important. Because people are making decisions without knowing what the program is. We don't all know what it is. You know, that's why the education is so important. Maybe it'll be unanimous that we don't do it after, but at least we'll know we properly vetted it out and looked at it. Now we're throwing it away not knowing.
What was the cost for the public meeting portion of the education?
Well, the total bill was $30,000. There was a portion of that was most of that was for the actual meetings with the public and different groups and stuff. I think there was some money in there for preparation of some materials and education for the council and for staff members and stuff, so that we'd be prepared to answer any questions that we got from the public as well. So there was some money in there. I don't recall specifically how that was broken out, but it seems so most of that money that the council had authorized was actually going towards the public education piece and the meetings with the public, so.
Well, why ask? And I mean, some of that 30, there was like several thousand for a website. I mean,
Yeah.
There were, yes, there were a
just
number of
think,
other costs.
so I agree with both Councilor Libby and Councilor Dote. One, I do think we're throwing away an opportunity to truly save the taxpayers' money, but I agree with Councilor Libby that for some reason that message we're being looked at as just another fee, and we'll raise taxes next year, which is accurate. But for some reason we got on this thing at the start saying we're going to reduce your taxes, which we all know if we did pay as you throw would reduce property taxes in this community for solid waste. It's not going to reduce taxes on everything else that the city does. It's going to reduce your taxes when it comes to solid waste, because you're no longer going to be paying for your neighbor who doesn't recycle, which is the case now. And for every business out there that doesn't recycle, we're paying that. We subsidize that. Every person who recycles is subsidizing half the city who doesn't. Our recycling rates are dismal in this community. It's almost embarrassing how little we recycle, and then the cost for us to recycle it all compared to what we're actually hauling away is ridiculous. We're paying an outrageous amount for very minimal tons of recycling. So I'm still good with some type of education, pulling the citizens together in a meeting place that's big enough to handle it, and at least providing some basic information to them. Because then that tide of negativity that we've seen so far, and I have seen, may shift. And if we can do that at a reasonable price, have a couple of good public meetings, and keeping it in check cost-wise, would anyone be open to just that portion of the education? Because we'll know after a meeting or two whether it really doesn't matter what we say, this program would never go, or if we may see that people are truly have an understanding of what's happening and may want to see more. But we need, if anyone's interested in that, I would be supportive of that.
Councilor Chance?
I'd like to add a few observations that I don't agree, obviously, with the councilor from Ward 2. But we spent, I believe, $80,000 about 10 years ago for Bates Mill number 5 to tear it down. Council voted on that. The cranes are in place. The money was spent. That was money we lost because the council just said, let's do it. It didn't work out that way. That money was gone, never to be returned. The building is still there today because councilors since have had a different point of view. The same can be said for this. We can spend this money now and the next council can throw it out the window or not. But I think it's better to have a council who lets everyone know what they think of this and listens to people in between now and then in January, then comes back to the table fresh and looks at this and says, okay, here's what we want to do. Yes, we want to do what the previous council did, or no, we've looked at this again and we don't. So I think there's a risk here to follow the same pattern that we've done before with councils who decide to do something controversial and then turn around and change course, and the city loses money, a lot of times wasted, for something that really wasn't going to happen. It almost did. So this is one of those types of issues that I think we really need to be careful about, and I wouldn't want to spend $30,000 for something just to bail out on it. And also, the Finance Committee did look at this. It did come to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee rejected the recommendation on several grounds. that was supposed to come back to the council. It didn't. I don't believe it ever came back to the finance committee.
It did come back to the council. We haven't gone back to the finance committee because of this discussion.
Right.
Okay, so that's where that has stopped, and I'm not sure really what the progress was with regards to returning this to the finance committee or answering the concerns the finance committee had. That's another issue as to some of the reasons this hasn't moved anywhere.
Well, but most of the concerns the finance committee had was that they wanted to make sure that the council had full information, and we brought all of that back to the council, and I think most of the specific concerns that finance had raised were addressed with the council, and then we were ready to go back to finance committee, and I started hearing from people, maybe we shouldn't proceed, and that's when I said, well, let's hold off and go back to the council to make sure how they want to proceed.
And just to make sure that information is correct, in reference to Bates Mill number 5, it wasn't a flim-flam of the council. It wasn't one council authorizing and then another council changing their mind. There were legal matters that put a hold on that demolition, so that's why that changed. It wasn't because an old council said tear it down, a new council came in and said, no, we don't want to do that. So I want to make that clear.
Okay, Council Bouchard and Council Cloutier.
I would say that my opinions on pay-as-you-throw have evolved since that last vote. They're still evolving, but we voted as a council. I think we said what we wanted, and I think unless we take another vote, that vote should stand. I think it can be said of the next council, they can undo everything that this council's done. So, why are we here? We can go home now and wait till January. So, although I may not fully agree with pay-as-you-throw as it sits right now, we made a decision, and next council can deal with that.
Council Cloutier?
So, this is a big enough issue, I think, in the community that my end goal or my hope would be that this would become a referendum issue regardless, whether that's before implementation, after implementation. I think it's something that residents should have a chance to vote on. I think in preparation for that, it is important for us to do the sort of public education piece. And I like Councilor Kerr's recommendation that perhaps we just do that piece of the proposal as opposed to the website and the other pieces.
Councilor Dote?
I guess my only problem with doing just the meeting part of it is we don't hit everybody that way. I mean, you can look right down this list. How do we all do our research? Online. If they're going to have a website where you can go and look at it whenever you want, get your own questions answered. A meeting is not going to be able to answer every citizen's question lined up 30,000 deep, but people can go whenever they want to look at those things. I just think it's one of those things, and it's risk reward. We're looking at spending $30,000. You look at it one way, there's some that are saying the rewards from it could be big. Others saying it's not. Until we find out what those rewards or risks are, we can't make an informed decision. And that's, it would bother me even more that a new council would come in with no background on this and come and make a decision to change something when they haven't been educated on it. So I still think, like I said, what the end happens, whether it passes or not, I think the education part of it is the most important thing to me. People have to understand what the program is, what it can do.
Councilor Dubois?
I'll try to speak. I agree. We do need to be educated on the program, not only from the company that's coming in and educating it from their standpoint, but I would also like to be educated from the city's standpoint as well. And I also agree with Councilor Cloutier about going out to referendum, because I have heard a lot of negative about it and a lot of people that actually do want to voice their opinion. So.
I'm totally confused.
Any other comments?
So I think we made it clear to you, Ed?
Actually, no. Right now, and I'm not sure where Leslie is, but I just did a quick count on my own, and I've got 2 saying proceed as planned, 2 saying hold off until after the election, and 2 saying we ought to do something in between the 2. And I'm not sure where you were, Leslie. You want to throw your hat in one of those rings?
I want to throw it in being educated.
So that would be proceed, okay. So I'll count you as a go forward as we had planned and stuff, so.
Why don't we just take a show of hands, how many want to proceed? 1, 2, 3, 4.
With the education is what
With
we're
the
talking about.
education portion, not with the implementation.
Oh, yeah,
No.
yeah.
No.
We're only
Yeah.
talking, we're only
Never been
talking the
tied in with
education
this.
piece.
It's two completely different things.
Okay.
That's where I think a lot of people are getting confused. It's not, we're not saying we're going forward with the program. We're going forward with the education of the program. That's a
Right.
whole nother vote that will be the next council, whether we go through it or not. But people have to be educated before we can vote on it.
Okay,
Well, I guess
Okay.
you got the direction.
So
Mr.
we'll,
Mayor?
we'll go back to the finance committee and get this approved through them, and then we'll proceed with that, so, thank you.
If I may.
Counselor, yes, Counselor.
Thank you.
Stevenson.
With that as it is, I would like to remind everyone of the concerns that several of us had last time this was around with the education program. When we looked at it in Finance Committee, it was laid out. I don't believe that had ever gone to the council at that point. One of the things the council had talked about previously was having many meetings. I had suggested no less than 2 and almost got dragged out of the room because it wasn't enough, and I agree with that. We need to have more than 3 meetings. The program that was presented to the Finance Committee had 3, maybe 4 meetings. It fell far short of the expectations of this council, especially myself and a few others. I believe we did discuss that when that came back to the council, but I do not know where that has ended up. I have no indication of anything expanding on the number of meetings. The discussions here in this room were upwards of 10, 12 meetings a year of education, some people were saying. That may be excessive to some, but I think this is an important thing. 3 or 4 meetings at the most is inadequate. That was one of my contentions, and it still is, and it remains to this day, to spend $30,000 on a bill of goods that falls far short of what we were told we were going to be getting and what the council had discussed in our meetings. It was also brought up the second time it came to the council. The Finance Committee had concerns, but those weren't the primary concerns for the Finance Committee bringing this back to the council. So these are important things, and if we just blindly say go for it, 3 meetings over 4 months, that falls far short of the expectations of this council when this was brought twice. So that is a big concern for me, and we're spending the money to do this in a way that isn't going to serve the best interests of people that are for or against this.
We did address that when we brought it back to the council this last time. We didn't get many comments on the meetings that we identified, but that was addressed in there, and it'll be addressed again as part of the Finance Committee, so.
So what I recall from that meeting was that we were going to do less stakeholder meetings and more public meetings,
Correct.
I think.
Correct.
Is what the council shared.
Correct.
Okay.
So do you have
That might
revised
probably
numbers
address
on
that.
those, Dave?
I don't have them with me here tonight. We were just trying to figure out were we even going to proceed or not tonight, so I don't have all that stuff, but that was in your package, that when we talked about it back in,
Must have
seems
been.
so about a month ago,
Yeah.
so, but it was in part of your package, and it'll be part of the package with the Finance Committee, so.
Ed, could you maybe send those to the council?
We can send that all back.
Sure,
We'll send it
sure.
all back around for a council, and if any of you have comments, let us know.
Yep,